All right. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, good evening. Good to have you here. I'm Rebecca Rhodes, and welcome to the first day of our workshop. Now, let's first just double check and make sure you're hearing me okay. Could you just let me know in the chat if you are hearing and seeing loud and clear? And I'll wait to see if someone replies. Good to see everybody here. Great. Glad you can hear everything. Well, we have got some great information for you today. So let's get started. Good to have you here. And let's move into it. A bit of housekeeping first. Join the chat if you haven't yet. All you need to do is sign into your YouTube, your Google account to do that. It's good to see everybody here. The lessons will take place at this time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you can't be here or if you have to leave early, it's okay because you can watch replays until April 29th. You can find a schedule of our lessons at the beginning of the course in Lesson 2. And at this point, everyone has access to all of the tutorials in our membership. When you log into our school, the My Courses page will appear, and that's where you can see all of your tutorials. And if you're looking for something in particular, you can use the search bar at the top of the page. So today, take notes, ask questions, or just sit back and watch the replay later. Sit back and enjoy yourself now. So, an overview of what to expect. And you can find the schedule under the welcome preparation part of the course. We are going to take our time here, painting your pet. One new thing every 2 weeks. So you'll have time to work on your painting, and you also will have links to the tutorials that you can use as a guide. So this week, today and tomorrow, preparing for a strong start to your painting. Choosing your photo, which many of you have done already. Your layout, the size of the painting, how to prepare the paper, how to choose colors. Tomorrow, how to create your drawing. Then you'll have this week and the next week to work on those things, to make those decisions. Then mid-February, we'll move into the eyes, nose, and mouth, how to paint them. And then you'll have time to create those things in your own painting. And you will have feedback from me. You and I will work together privately as you progress through your painting. Then beginning of March, we move into the first pale layers of color in your painting. As you progress through the painting, know that things may appear uncomfortable, but be patient and trust the process. It will come together. Moving into March, then the next step is moving into details, darker values, going darker, refining color and fur. Again, there will be uncomfortable stages. Persevere. At the end of March, we'll talk about how to finish your painting and how to frame your painting. So that's the overview of what you'll see. And you do have access to these lessons until April 29th. So it's okay if you get behind. Go into it with this mindset that we will take our time. You will have time to work on your painting. There will be uncomfortable stages, but trust the process. And you do have time. It's okay if you get behind. You don't need to keep up with our lessons. I know how life gets in the way, but I do encourage you to practice first, experiment first, then work on that stage in your painting. And it's okay if it doesn't work out. It's okay to start over. Take your time. Take breaks. Let yourself feel a little tentative, unsure. It's all good. It's all part of the process. I feel tentative, and I've been doing this for a while. And I will provide personal feedback in each step. To make the most of this workshop, stay in touch with me through email, okay? And I will respond. And finally, it's very important that you paint in your own style. You don't need to create your paintings the way I do. You do you. So today we're talking about planning your painting, planning for a strong start, and choosing colors. So first, your reference photo, the layout of how you might want your painting to look, the size of your painting, a quick look at materials, how to prepare your watercolor paper to avoid frustration, how to choose colors for your painting, and yes, we will communicate privately using that email. Talking about the reference photo. Okay, now, if you've already chosen your reference photo, that's great. This may just reinforce what you've already got and show you that, okay, I've got a good photo. The reference photo is the image that you will use to create your painting. It's the one the pose that you will use. It's the image you will use to create the drawing. It is helpful to have additional photos if you have them. Have additional photos to double check fur color, shapes, lines, and other details. Now, if you only have one reference photo, that's fine. Go with it. This is an example of a commission I did, and there was only one photo. If you have a number of photos and you're not sure what to paint, find one that somehow touches you, that grabs at your heart. It might be the eyes, the pose, the personality. It could be anything. You do want your photo to provide enough information, enough details that you can use it as a guide when you create your drawing and your painting. Now, the photo might contain clear details, but parts of the image might not be so clear, and that might be okay. We do need to be able to work with what we have. We need to be able to problem solve. So if you're not sure, see if you can kind of use your imagination or use other references as a guide. It is helpful to have additional photos. Ask yourself, looking at your photo, can you see these features? Can you see colors, shapes, lines in the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the ears, if you're painting ears? Can you clearly see colors, lines, shapes? Can you see the color, the direction, the length of the fur? Can you see dark values, light values, midtones? If you can see darks, lights, midtones, that will help your painting to be interesting, more lifelike. Can you see any lines, patterns, as in this cat, that will make the animal unique? Now let's look a little closer at eyes, nose. So look for this in the eyes. Can you see the color? The shape of the eye, the shape of the iris? Can you see where the pupil is? That's very important. The eyelids. Can you see highlights? Now here's what I mean. And by the way, if you can't quite tell, it is so helpful. And I constantly adjust the brightness of the photo. And if you're not sure how to do that, reach out to me because I can provide some suggestions. As I create a painting, I'm constantly throughout the process making the photo brighter and darker, adjusting the brightness. Going brighter or lighter helps you to see dark shapes. So now I adjusted the brightness of this photo. I can see the shape of the outer eye. I can see the shape of the iris. I can clearly see where the pupil is. Do you see the red arrow? And I can see the upper lid, the lower lids, and you see where the highlight is? See that red arrow? You want to create at least one highlight shape. That's a very pale shape. It's a reflection of light, and that will give character and life to your eyes. So you do want to include a highlight shape. This is a challenging photo. It's hard to tell the colors. It's hard to see the eyes. Even with the brightness adjusted, it's very difficult. And I don't know if I would use a photo like this. If a client asked me, I might say, can you provide another photo? Now, nose, mouth, ears, same idea. Does the photo provide enough information so that you can draw and paint all of the lines and shapes? So what to look for in a nose? The overall outer shape of the nose, the outer edges. Can you clearly see them? You might need to adjust the brightness or the sharpness of the photo. Can you clearly see the nostrils? Can you see a vertical line in the center? Dogs and cats tend to have a vertical line in the center of the nose. Now, dogs tend to have a highlight shape, a light shape on the top of the nose and underneath the nostrils. Cats, not so much. So here's what I mean about dogs. I can clearly see the overall shape of this nose, like the outer edge, and I did adjust the brightness of the photo. I can clearly see the nostrils. I can see the vertical line in the center of the nose. And those are the highlights. In a dog, in a canine, you will often see a lighter shape in the upper nose, and you often see light kind of crescent shapes right below the nostrils. Do you see the red arrows? So look for highlights, and if you don't see them, you might want to create highlight shapes, those lightest shapes, reflections of light. If you're not sure, we can talk about it. Now, regarding the mouth, these are things that I've learned, mistakes that I've made. So I hope this will be helpful to you. Any lines or shapes in the mouth, especially where the mouth begins and ends. Any tongue, gums, teeth, if you can see them. You do want to see the separation between the chin and the neck. Do you see the red arrow? You want to see where the neck and the chin separates into the body. That is so helpful. And sometimes you can just faintly see it. Sometimes a mouth is just a line if the mouth is closed, and you do want to note where the mouth begins and ends. And here, I can see the separation between the chin and the body. I can just faintly see it, and it is helpful to adjust the brightness, the contrast, the sharpness of your image. In the ears, if you can see the overall shape of the ears, like the outer edge. This is important. You want to see where the ears separate into the head. That's going to make it really helpful as you create your painting. Where do the ears separate into the head? You want to see the colors in the ears, different values, shapes of fur, what direction is the fur going? And if you can't tell, will it help to adjust the brightness, the sharpness, the contrast in your photo? Or can you find similar photos online? Photos of the similar breed. So in this photo, I adjusted the brightness. I can clearly see the overall outer edges of the ears. I can see where the ear separates into the head. Do you see the red line on the right side? There it is. That's where the ear separates. I can clearly see the edge of the head. I can see colors. I can see dark, light, mid-tone values. I can even see the direction of the fur in this photo. Now, if you can't quite tell, that's where it's helpful to use additional photos. Look up the breed online. Adjust the brightness of the photo. Do what you have to do. So eyes, nose, mouth, ears. Now, colors. Can you clearly see the colors in your photo? Now, what if the colors aren't that great? What if the colors are not that clear, but you can still see the eyes, the nose, the mouth? That's where additional photos are helpful. Look up the breed online. Thinking about fur, can you clearly see the length and the curving of the fur? Even if part of the photo is not clear, if you just get an idea of the fur patterns, you can move forward with confidence and use additional photos. I'm going to keep saying that, and adjust the brightness of the photo. I'm going to keep saying that. Now, you might, if you're not quite sure what I mean by value, because when I was first learning watercolor, I couldn't quite grasp the concept of value. It simply refers to how dark or light something is. A dark value is a dark color. A light value is going to be pale. A midtone value is going to be the colors that are not the darkest and not the lightest. And if you can see darks, lights, and midtones in your reference photo, that's going to help create a realistic painting. So dark values underneath the ear, those dark shapes between the eyes. Midtone values, not the darkest, not the lightest. Any colors that aren't the darkest or the lightest, I call midtones. Then the lightest values in this dog would be the white in the chest and even the highlight shapes. If you can't tell, it is helpful to look at a black and white version of the photo. That helps me to clearly see dark, light, midtone values without the colors getting in the way. Why do values matter? Well, we use values to create shadow, like darks create shadow. Lights help to create light. We even use values in our paintings to create the impression of inward and outward curve and bone structure. If your painting is all one value, that's okay, but you can make it even more realistic if you create more than one value. So you want to see a range, darks, lights, midtones. This is a problematic photo. All I see is very dark and I can see white. Where are the midtones? I think it would be difficult to create contour, shadow, bone structure. Now, talking about important lines and shapes, what should I be looking for? You look in your photo. You want your photo to clearly show the overall shape of the head, the ears, the neck, the body, the division, where the head divides into the ears, where the head divides into the neck. You want to see bone structure in the face. Where are the cheekbones, for example? And this is related to value. Dark and midtone values will help you to identify these features. For example, can we see the overall edge of the head, the ears, the neck, the body? Yeah, I can. I can clearly see where the edge of the cat is, so I'd be able to draw that and paint it. I can clearly see where the head and chin separates into the neck. It's slightly darker in value where the head and chin separates into the neck. Do you see that slightly darker value? There's the red line. Do you see it? It's a little darker right underneath the chin, right underneath the head, and there's often going to be a shadow there. Can you see the separation between the body and the foot? Yes. You see the red line at the bottom of the photo? It's slightly darker. There's a bit of a shadow, a slightly darker value that helps me to see that separation. So values show us, even in white fur, slightly darker chunks of fur. It helps you to create shapes, even in white parts or very pale fur. Here, can we see the overall edge of the head, the ears, the neck, the body? I can clearly see it. The light background helps. I can see where the head separates into the ear, so I can see the edge of the head. I can see where the chin divides into the neck. There's a slight difference in value. The chin is just a little bit lighter and the lower neck is a little darker, just a hair darker. Can I see bone structure in the face? Yes. Here's what I mean. Do you see those dark shapes in between the eyes? That's where there's a bit of inward curve and outward curve. That's where a bone is. I'm seeing some slightly darker values in the cheeks, and that helps to show us where the cheekbones are. Dark values are indicating shadow in the lower ears. So value, there you go. I hope that helps. If your photo, if you're doing a full or partial body painting, which I think some of you are, same idea. It's just that the lines and shapes might be a little smaller, but you still want to be able to see The eyes, the nose, the mouth, the fur, the shape of the head, the ears, the body, the separation between the head, the ears, the chin. You still want to see clear colors. You still want to see values, even if you're doing full body or partial body. So is this photo usable? The problem is the entire photo is too dark. So I adjusted the brightness of the photo. I adjusted the sharpness of the photo. I can see things a little bit better, but I still don't think I would use this for a painting. If a client asked me to paint this, I would definitely ask for additional photos and maybe ask, do you have a different photo that I could use for the painting? Is this photo usable? There are some issues. Parts of the photo are very dark. It's hard to see the details in the eye on our right. So I experimented. This was a commission for a client. I adjusted the brightness significantly. I adjusted the sharpness to reveal hidden details, and then I could better see the eye on our right, and I could better see the nostrils. I also used additional photos because I wasn't sure about the true color of the dog. And that's where it's helpful to ask your client, or if it's your own pet, know the breed or a similar breed. So yeah, I did use that photo and I created a painting that I was very happy with because I manipulated the reference photo. So do what you have to do. And you need to decide, should I use a less than helpful photo? It's up to you. It's up to where you are in your watercolor journey, your vision, how much detail you wish to create, which has to do with your own style. If you're not sure, experiment first. Just experiment with maybe part of the photo. Maybe do half of the photo and see if you can create it. See if you can paint an eye and a nose. Experiment with color, patterns. If you have only one photo, go with it. We'll work together and see what we can do. So here's your checklist for choosing your reference photo. Ask yourself, can I see the lines, the shapes in the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the ears? Enough that I could create an accurate drawing and use it as a guide in the painting. Can I see the colors, the fur, separation between ears and head, and between head and body? Can I see different values, dark, light, mid-tone? Does the photo make sense? If something's not right, is it fixable? Can I use my imagination? Use one photo to create the drawing and then use additional photos as a guide if you have them. And we will work together to solve challenges. Your photo doesn't have to be perfect. It's really challenging to take good photos. And there are ways to work around some issues to an extent. Okay? So if you're not sure, we'll talk about it. All right. So there it is. Thoughts about the photo. Feel free, if you have any questions, to ask them in the chat. And I'm just taking a look at the chat. All right. Do I work from a printed photo or just on my computer? Well, you know, a lot of artists do work from a printed photo. They actually print it out and have it in front of them. But my printer's not very good. So I use my computer. I actually use Microsoft Word. I pull up Microsoft Word and I have the photo in there, and then I can adjust the color, the brightness, anything I need to. And I have my computer sitting over to the side and I use that as a guide. Or if I don't have a computer, I use my phone, or you could use a tablet. I find that sometimes when you print a photo, the colors might not be accurate, but really go with what works best for you. I hope that answers your question. Keep the questions coming, and I'm going to continue. Where am I here? All right. Let's talk about what size you want your painting to be. And, if you choose to use a mat in your painting, we're going to talk about that too. So let's say you've got your photo. Next, what size should my painting be? How should I lay out my painting in a way that's interesting and pleasing? Should I crop some of the photo? Deciding these things now will make it so much easier when it's time to frame your painting. I'm going to take a drink of water real quick. Okay. I'm telling you, I learned the hard way. If you can decide these things now, it's going to make it so much easier. So I had to get my head around this. I find it helpful to choose a mat first to use as a guide. Now, what is a mat? The mat is placed over the painting. So this is my painting. Okay? This is the mat. I place the mat over the painting. So what I do is I choose a mat size first. There you go. I choose a mat size first, and then I base my painting size on the mat size. Now, that's just one way to do it. I find it helpful to do it that way. The mat opening, which is this. This is the mat opening. This is the outer edge of the mat. Okay? So the mat opening tends to be square, rectangular, sometimes oval or circle, but usually square or rectangular. White or off-white is a very popular color. Now let's talk about size. So I base my paintings on common mat sizes that you can purchase where you live. Now, part of this is because I paint commissions for people, and I want people to be able to easily mat and frame their paintings. So I visited stores in my area. I live in Pennsylvania. And I purchased some different sized mats that I felt comfortable painting that size. And I used these mats as templates. So I purchased this mat at, I think, Michael's. All right, we have something called Michael's in Pennsylvania, and I thought this is a good size. I would be comfortable with this size painting. So I bought this. I also bought a slightly larger mat, but you have to go with what you're comfortable painting. I also did online research. What are common mat and frame sizes where I live? I did a lot of research. I also visited area art shows to see what sizes artists were offering. And this is what I came up with. Common in the United States, common mat and frame sizes. An 8 by 10 inch mat with a 4.5 by 6.5 inch opening is a common size. Now, what do I mean? This is an 8 by 10 inch mat. So the size of the mat is the outer edge. And then this is the opening. So common sizes are what you see here. These are the sizes that I offer clients. So what does it mean? A 4.5 inch by 6.5 inch mat opening. The watercolor paper is going to be slightly larger, and it will overlap underneath the mat. The actual mat size is 8 by 10 inches. That is the outer edge of the mat. So when you shop for mats and it says it's an 8 by 10 inch mat, that's going to be the outer edge. And usually when you're shopping, it will tell you what the size of the mat opening is. I had to get my head around that. Now, then what you do is, I've got a frame here. So this is actually an 8 by 10 inch mat with a 4.5 by 6.5 inch opening. You place your painting behind the mat, and we are going to talk about how to mat and frame. Okay, so I've got the mat now, and what you take your frame, there's the front, here's the back. Now the back of the frame is 8 by 10 inches. So the mat fits into the back of the frame. An 8 by 10 inch mat will fit into an 8 by 10 inch frame. When you're looking for a frame size, this is not the frame size. This opening is the frame size. Okay? Because this part of the frame could be wider, it could be thinner, this part of the frame. So this is what the frame size means, this. I hope that makes sense. And I do see some questions in the chat, so I'll address those when I'm finished with this thought. Common sizes in Europe, the sizes may be measured differently, so research and visit your local stores and choose a size that will make it easy for you to paint and frame. If you're not sure, go to area art stores, art and craft stores, purchase a couple mats in sizes that you like. You don't even have to purchase the frame, just purchase a mat. And then fit your painting to size the mat. The size of the mat and the opening are indicated on the product, or it should be. If you're not sure, just take a ruler and measure it yourself. My favorite sizes are an 11 by 14 inch mat with a 7.5 by 9.5 inch opening. They call it an 8 by 10 painting. That size allows for expressive eyes and features without being too large, but it really depends on your preference. You might want to go smaller, you might want to go larger. And if you're not near a store, you could even create your own template based on standard sizes. Cut openings in a piece of paper. Then you can see how large your painting would be. Now I am seeing some questions. Let's see what we got here. Is it easier, Stacy, is it easier to paint a larger or smaller size? So is 8 by 10 easier than 5 by 7 or vice versa? If it really depends on how comfortable you are painting larger or smaller. For 5 by 7 paintings, for smaller paintings, you might want to, this next thing we talk about might be helpful. If you want to focus on just part of the face, a smaller, like a 5 by 7 might work. But if you are doing a full body and you're choosing 5 by 7, just keep in mind, everything's going to be so small. If you want to do an 8 by 10, that's a good size for a head, neck, partial chest, or a full body. Or even if you're doing a full body, you might want to think about a slightly larger so that you can easily create all of the details. So 5 by 7, if you like creating small, that might work. 8 by 10 or larger if you don't like creating small so much. I hope that helps, and we can talk about that, you and I. If I want a finished 11 by 14 inch picture, how large should the image be? Let's see if the next thing that we talk about is helpful. Okay? So are you saying you want your actual mat opening, do you want this to be 11 by 14? If you could let me know in the chat. All right. Let's continue on and see if this will help to answer some of your questions. Talking about the layout, the pose of your painting. Now, it depends on your vision, okay? It really does, like what you're drawn to. You might want to do a beautiful close-up like this to capture the personality, and that would be a good 5 by 7 inch painting because it's a close-up. You can easily create the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the fur, because everything's kind of close up. You could do an 8 by 10 too. Everything would be pretty big. But yeah, good 5 by 7. Now, very common, head, partial neck, chest. These are my favorite 8 by 10 inch paintings. Head, partial neck, chest, because I can still clearly create the eyes, which I think are the most important. You could do a full or partial body. Now, this was a 5 by 7 inch painting, and it worked. I was able to easily create the details and create the eyes. The Chihuahua is an 8 by 10 inch painting. If you're not sure, I'll tell you what helps. Research how other pet portrait artists lay out their paintings and borrow their ideas. Find paintings that you're like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to do that in my painting. It's quite all right to do that. My clients tend to prefer either close-ups, as in the cat here, or partial head, partial neck, partial chest. That's what my clients ask for. Now, where do I place my subject in the painting? Think about the focal point. Where's the center of interest? It's often going to be the eyes. I am first drawn to the eyes when I look at a painting. And where to place the eyes? The rule of thirds is helpful. Divide. Let's say here's how you do it. Let's say you've got your mat, okay? And this is where I'm going to divide this into thirds. Okay, now back to this. So I'm thinking about my mat opening. I'm dividing my mat opening into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and where the lines intersect, the green circles, place your focal point, I'm going to say the eyes, on or near those locations of intersect, those green circles. Or you don't have to do that. You could place your focal point along the upper horizontal or the lower horizontal line. Here's some examples. In this example, one of my eyes is near that focal point in the upper left. In this example, the eyes are lined up with the top horizontal line. In this example, the eyes are in the upper focal points where the lines intersect. You can also place the eyes smack in the center of the painting, as I did here. So you've got options. Now, what about space around the subject? How much space? It's really up to you. I have seen paintings that have tons of white space around it, and it looks great. And then I've seen other paintings that completely fill the opening, and there's no background space at all. So it really is up to you. And you can crop your photo. You can crop your photo so the edges line up with the edge of the mat. If you're not sure, research. Look up other animal artists. Look up other paintings online. See how they do it. Say, ooh, I like that. And then emulate that in your own paintings. That's how you learn. I keep a Pinterest board. I find images online. I save them to Pinterest in a private board, which is very helpful when I need ideas. So some examples of edges. Here in this dog on the left, I cropped the edges just a little bit. So part of the upper ear is lined up with the edge of the mat, part of the upper back, and part of the right side is cropped out. It's cut out. I removed it. That way I'm just seeing a little bit of dark background, which I thought was tasteful. In the dog on the right, I used the rule of thirds. The eye on our right is where the lines intersect in the upper right. And I use the eyes as the focal point. And you see, it doesn't have to be both eyes. It could be just one eye. As far as space around the subject, here I put white space around the dog. The eyes are along the upper line. A lot of white space. I liked it. I thought it looked nice. But in this pug, I lined up the right side with the edges of the mat and left a lot of white space on the left side. It depends on your style. It depends on your vision, what you think looks good. And we can talk about it if you're not sure. So purchase inexpensive mats in common sizes or create your own. Experiment. I experiment on Microsoft Word because I can move things around and experiment with how the image looks inside the mat. Experiment with cropping edges. Think about where you want your eyes to be. Research and take your time thinking about this. You don't need to decide on day one. I often experiment And again, Microsoft Word is what I use. And I save it up, I close it, I walk away, I do something different, come back the next day, I open it up, and I'm like, ooh, I like that. Or, ew, what was I thinking? Yeah, so take your time as you decide. So your checklist. So you choose your reference photo. Choose a mat. It's so helpful to choose a mat right away. Decide your layout, your pose, your size, and share your decisions with me. I will be in touch with you asking, how's it going? What are you thinking? We do have a video, preparation video number 6, if you're not sure about how to adjust the brightness of your reference photo. Now, a brief overview of materials. I'm going to just jump back here and take a look at the chat. So, yes, the frame size is 11 by 14. Yeah, if you have a frame size, if this is 11 by 14, your mat opening, let's see, is probably going to be 8 by 10. Or really 7.5 by 9.5. Okay, so 11 by 14 inch frame, 7.5 by 9.5 inch opening. That's what I see in Pennsylvania. It might be a little different, okay, but yeah, you said you think good. I answered your question. So let's move forward. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on materials. The materials, it will be good to have these materials ready to go before you begin your painting. Something to put the paint on, a palette. Really, all you need is a plate, something that the paint will not soak into. We don't need many colors. We're going to talk about colors. Just a couple brushes, container for water, towel, paper towel. I use a paper towel to wipe my brush. Watercolor paper, something to attach your paper to, something sturdy. And I do have a hair dryer on hand to quickly dry my color. So I use this palette. Any smooth surface that the paint will not soak into, a plate, a plastic or tin tray or box. You may only need a couple colors. It depends on your subject. The small tubes will provide plenty of paint, or you could use, what are they called, pans? The pans are fine, tubes or pans. If you want to get started right away, use any kind of watercolor paint that you have on hand. In our school, we use Winsor & Newton professional watercolor paints. If you're just getting started, the Cotman, Winsor & Newton Cotman, are student grade paints, and they're less expensive and they're of good quality. If you're not sure yet, if you don't want to spend the money, there are many excellent brands of watercolor paints. So use what you prefer. We're going to discuss colors in just a moment. So brushes, I use a small pointed round brush that has a narrow pointed tip for creating small lines, details, thin, fine hairs. I also have a medium-sized brush for covering larger areas. Just a general purpose round watercolor brush would be fine. And then I do use a different brush, just an old brush for mixing colors on my palette. That's optional. Save your good brushes for painting, but it's okay. Really, all you need is a small brush and a medium-sized brush. The watercolor paper, you know, the quality of the watercolor paper does make a difference. Now, if you're just starting out, I didn't want to spend a lot of money when I was just starting out. Okay, so I just bought an inexpensive watercolor tablet. And feel free to do that. Just start out with less expensive paper. The results might not be quite the same, but you'll have something to use as you get started. And then when you decide that you like this style, purchase the good paper. In our school, we use Osh, or some people call it Arches, 140-pound natural white cold press paper. So Arches or Osh is the brand name. 140 pound is the weight of the paper. There's 90 pounds, 300 pounds, 400 pounds. I find generally 140 pound works very well. Natural white is the color. Cold press means that the paper is just slightly textured, but it's the most popular from my research. Cold press is the most popular. It's going to be green if you buy the Osh paper. Hot press paper is something else they offer. It's very smooth. It's like a whole different thing. So if you like hot press, go for it. If you're not sure, I recommend cold press paper. You can purchase single sheets, packs of sheets, and cut them a size. That's what I do. I find it more expensive. It's, what's the word I'm looking for? Less expensive that way. You can buy watercolor blocks of different sizes with 10 or 20 sheets. When I was learning, my teacher recommended I purchase a block of 8 by 10 or 9 by 12 inch watercolor paper. If you're just starting out, feel free to use less expensive watercolor paper. There are many excellent brands of paper, so do the research, experiment. Give yourself time to learn what you like, what best fits your needs. Additional materials, container for water. I use a large plastic container. Many artists use sturdy glasses, a towel for wiping your brushes, cleaning up, a device to review or to look at your photo, either that or print your photo. I use my phone and my computer. Some people use their tablets. Some people use their television. Get creative, right? Some kind of base to attach your paper to, something sturdy. It could be cardboard. You can use masking tape to tape the watercolor paper to the sturdy board. I often use something called gator foam board, which is a foam, very sturdy foam board. For smaller paintings, 5 by 7 or smaller, I tape the edges of my watercolor paper to sturdy cardboard, and that keeps the paper from bending. For larger paintings, 8 by 10 or larger, I staple my watercolor paper to gator foam board, and that keeps the paper from buckling, keeps it flat. And a hair dryer. It's important that you do what works best for you, and you might need to experiment. That's what my setup looks like. I'm right-handed. I keep everything on the right. And while I'm painting, I hold a folded paper towel in my other hand to wipe the brush. Now I'm just checking the chat. Okay, good. And taking a quick drink, and then we're going to talk about how large should your watercolor paper be. Okay. A lot of information today, isn't it? I hope it's not overwhelming. You want your watercolor paper to be larger than the matte opening. So the paper's larger than the painting. You need room along the edges of your painting to attach your paper to sturdy board to keep it flat during your painting. So determine the size of your matte opening first. Then add at least 2 inches to each edge of the paper. And this will allow the paper to overlap underneath the matte opening, and it will give you room to attach your watercolor paper to something flat using tape or staples. When your painting's finished, you remove it from your sturdy board, remove the tape or staples, and then you cut off the excess, you cut off the excess paper, and you can use regular scissors to do that. And you can use the excess paper for color tests. So here's an example of what I mean. This is a close-up. This is 5 by 7 inches. I'm trying to remember. So let's say if it's a 5 by 7 inch painting, my paper is 9 by 11. I added 2 inches to each side. So the paper is larger than the painting. And by the way, I tend to use the smoother side of the Osh or the Arches paper. And here I taped the watercolor paper. After creating the drawing, I taped the watercolor paper to a piece of sturdy cardboard. So this painting is sized to fit a 5 by 7 inch frame. So it's a small frame. Now what I'm talking about is that painting is sized to fit if this a 5 by 7 inch frame. So this is not the right size, but that's how you measure the frame. The opening, the matte opening, is 3 by 4.5 inches. Small painting, but it's a close-up, so I was able to easily create the eyes, the nose, and the fur. But the paper size is larger. I added 2 inches to each side so that I could attach the paper to the backing board. So that's what it looks like before I begin the painting. I've placed masking tape around the edge of the paper, attaching it to a sturdy piece of cardboard. I also placed masking tape around the edge of where the matte opening will be. But it's a little past where the matte opening will be, so there's room for overlap. So there's the end of the painting. And when you, at the end of the painting, you remove the masking tape, and you'll cut off the excess paper that you don't need, and you can frame it. This is a slightly larger painting. This is a 7.5 by 9.5 inch matte opening to fit an 11 by 14 inch frame, which is another size that I'm comfortable with. But the actual paper is larger. That gave me room to staple the edges of the watercolor paper to a piece of gator foam board, which is sturdy foam board. Then I placed masking tape around the edge because I wanted to create a background. And then that gave me a straight edge to create a background. Here is another 8 by 10 inch painting to fit an 11 by 14 inch frame and matte. I stretched the paper first. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I stapled the paper to gator foam board while wet, allowed it to dry completely. Can you see the staples underneath the tape? I transferred the drawing to the paper after the paper was completely dry. I placed masking tape over the staples. That way I wouldn't jag myself in case any staples came loose. But that watercolor paper is firmly attached to a piece of gator foam board, so it did not buckle. It stayed flat during the painting. And there is a bit of overlap underneath the mat, so you don't see any edges. So that looks really nice when you place the mat over it. And that painting is not finished yet, or at this point it wasn't yet. Now, I was mentioning stretching. What does that mean? Do you need to prepare your watercolor paper? It's up to you, okay? Watercolor paper does tend to wrinkle and buckle during the painting. Many artists stretch their paper before creating their drawing, okay? So what's it mean to stretch? It involves soaking your paper in water, and while wet, this is the watercolor paper. You soak the watercolor paper in water for 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 6 minutes. While wet, attach your watercolor paper to some kind of sturdy board. Allow the paper to dry completely. Then you create your drawing. You put the drawing on the paper and begin your painting. That will keep your paper flat. Do I have to stretch my watercolor paper? There is no rule that says you have to. Some artists do, some artists don't. Just checking for questions here. When first starting watercolor, I did not stretch my paper. I'm like, I don't feel like stretching my paper. But my paper often ended up wrinkling, and it was so frustrating. So now I do make it a habit to stretch my watercolor paper to prevent wrinkling anything larger than 5 by 7. I find it 5 by 7 inches or smaller, the paper behaves. It doesn't wrinkle. But anything larger, it does tend to wrinkle if I don't stretch the paper. Now, even if you stretch your paper, It might buckle during your painting, but it will dry flat. So how do you stretch your paper? Here's what I do. I have a huge container that I bought at Target or Target, a big Tupperware, I think, container, large enough for the paper to fit in. I fill it with water. I just put it in my bathtub, fill it with clean water, lukewarm. I immerse the watercolor paper. I soak it for 5. I usually don't go for 8 minutes. I go 5, 6 minutes. I would not recommend soaking for over 10 minutes. When you're done soaking, you gently lift the paper from the water, allow the excess water to drip off. You lay the paper, I laid my paper on a piece of gator foam board, which is a sturdy foam board, and I staple. I just use standard, inexpensive staples. I staple the edges of the watercolor paper to the gator foam board about a 1/2 inch apart, lots of staples, or you could use water-activated tape. I've seen some artists use both. They staple, then they tape. I just don't like the tape. It's messy on my fingers. And then you allow the paper to dry completely. While it's drying, it might buckle a little bit, and that's a little scary. But let it dry completely. I let it go overnight. And then you're ready to transfer the drawing. When it's dry, transfer the drawing to the paper and get started. So I use gator foam board, which is a lightweight, rigid board. I use the 1/2 inch thickness. The board comes in different sizes. There is a video, preparation video number 3. The only thing I would say is if you look at the image on the right, you need to put more staples in than what you see in this image, because you really want to put the staples like a 1/2 inch apart. Otherwise, the paper might stretch in between the staples. I learned that the hard way. So everything I'm telling you is what I've learned. So some artists actually staple their paper to a piece of plywood, or they don't use gator foam board, they use something else. And some artists use water activated tape to adhere the edges to the board. But as I said, I just don't like the mess. But it's all personal preference. You really need to just try something. If it doesn't work out, try something else. So to stretch or not to stretch, it's up to you. If you do not stretch the paper, you might end up with a wrinkled painting. Stretching may prevent headaches later. Some artists say you must stretch. Some say, nah. You will learn from experience what works best for you. I tend to stretch anything larger than 5 by 7 inches. Now, I do see some questions, so pop them back here. All right, let's see. Have I ever painted directly onto the Osh block and then removed it when my painting was complete? Yeah, I have used, especially when I was a beginner, I used the arches or the Osh blocks. That paper is not stretched, so it might buckle. That's the only issue I ever had. I did have wrinkling and buckling, but that block, what it does is the edges are glued to the block, so during your painting it stays flat. So I would suggest go ahead and try a block if you want to give it a try. Go for it. With that much tape, do you have issues sometimes removing the tape from the paper? I've never had issues. I just use, where's my tape? I use standard masking tape. Some artists swear by drafting tape. And let's see. I've never had trouble, but if you're not sure, you might want to do a test run before you tape like your watercolor paper you're going to use. You might want to do a test run on just a little piece of watercolor paper and see if it sticks. Good question. Are you laying the wet paper on a sturdy board? Yeah, what I do is I soak the paper, and while it's wet, I place it on gator foam board, that sturdy foam board, while it's wet. While it's wet, I staple the paper to the board, and then you let it dry completely. And can you reuse gator foam board? Yes. I have had the same gator foam board for years, and it has little holes in it from the staples, but it's still just as good as it was. It's kind of stained. It has some watercolor stains on it, but I should have gotten a piece out. I don't have any sitting here. Yeah, it's definitely, I think Gator Foam board is definitely worth the price. You are all asking great questions. Keep them coming. Let's talk about choosing colors for your painting. This is, I think, the final subject for today. Now, I do want to say that every artist has their favorite set of colors. There are many brands, many good brands and colors and combinations. So I encourage you to experiment, use what you prefer. I'm going to share what I like to use when creating animal portraits. I do recommend you keep it simple. Just a few colors. This will keep it manageable. You don't need to purchase a lot of paints. Just a few paints can create many colors. Most animals tend to be white, gray, black, tan, brown, golden. Sometimes greens, reds, yellows, sometimes colors are more vibrant. My favorite colors that I tend to use are French ultramarine blue. Now this is Winsor & Newton. French ultramarine blue. I use burnt umber or burnt sienna because you can mix the blue and the brown to create all kinds of grays, blacks, and browns. My favorite pinks and reds are Permanent Rose and Scarlet Lake. Use what you prefer. My favorite yellows are Windsor Lemon and Yellow Ochre. Again, use your favorite. And I use a white product for whiskers. My favorite presently is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Or you could use white gouache, white watercolor paint, white ink. There are so many things you could use for whiskers. And an optional brand, Winsor & Newton Cotman. Great for beginners, affordable. A great place to start. But use your favorite colors. I wanted to talk a bit how I mix and layer. And if you look at preparation video 5, you can learn how I mix grays, blacks, and browns. I like to mix I like to mix French ultramarine blue in either burnt umber or burnt sienna to create grays, blacks, and browns. There are other colors that you could use. You could use your favorite black. You could use Payne's Gray and mix it with brown to create black. So many options. But I like to simplify, so I tend to go back to the same colors all the time. For tongues, pinkish parts around the eyes and noses. For skin, I use Permanent Rose and some kind of yellow, often Yellow Ochre or Windsor Lemon. And those are the mixes I use for tongue, gums, skin tones. And you can layer with blue and gray to create purples and greens. It's amazing what you can create with just a couple colors. For yellows, okay, a couple of us are doing some golden animals. I like to layer burnt sienna or burnt umber either with yellow ochre or Windsor Lemon. There's a slight difference. If you layer yellow with burnt sienna, your color will be just a little more reddish. If you layer yellow with burnt umber, your color will be more golden. And we will be talking in an upcoming lesson about how you can layer to get some different colors. And you can also use the tutorials in our school as a guide. If you layer Windsor Lemon and Yellow Ochre, you can create the most rich, vibrant yellows for golden eyes. And you can use yellow as an underpainting underneath brown, underneath green, and that creates a rich, vibrant color. Because watercolor is transparent, so you can see through each layer. For greens, you could mix yellow with blue. There's so many mixes that you could use. Experiment with the yellows and blues that you have on hand. More yellow will create a different kind of green. A little more blue will create a different kind of green. I've also used Payne's Gray, sap green, different kinds of yellows. And we have a course in our school called Conquer Eyes in Watercolor. And we do have green eyes. Or you could look at any tutorial in our school, look at the eye colors and watch the tutorial and use those colors in your painting. For browns and grays and blacks, I mix and layer either burnt sienna, which is a little more reddish, or burnt umber, which is not so reddish. I layer with ultramarine blue. You can also layer browns with yellow ochre to create more of a golden color. If you take a brown and you add a little bit of blue to it on your palette, you mix it, that creates a darker brown. If you add even more blue to your brown, it eventually becomes gray. And thicker consistencies and multiple layers create black. Permanent Rose and Scarlet Lake, I use those mixes, and I use layering to create the pinkish areas of noses, ears, around the eyes, around the mouth, and you can layer brown, and that will create a darker pinkish color. Here I layered in this nose. I started with pink, and then I applied thin layers of gray over it, and that's how you can create a pinkish black nose. And here in this duckling and in this tongue, I started with pink and then applied thin layers of blue to create purple. So many things you can do with just a couple colors. So I saw a question here. Will you look at our photo and help us choose colors? Yes, that is part of that's part of my job, and I look forward to doing that. And I hope that this will help too. How do you choose colors in your painting? Look at the photo and ask yourself. And by the way, there is a worksheet. There's a worksheet that you can download in this lesson that may help you get your thought process in line as you choose colors. Ask yourself, what colors do I see? You start with that. What colors am I seeing? Then, what colors shall I use? Now let's take a closer look. You want to break your subject down. What colors do I see in the eyes? In the nose? What colors do I see in the mouth? What are the lightest colors? What are the darkest? What are the mid-tone colors? You're breaking it down into smaller parts so that helps to avoid becoming overwhelmed. Do you see brown? Do you see grayish color, black? You might see tan, reddish, white. Use that PDF chart to guide your thought process. Common colors that you might see. You might see grays, pale gray, slightly darker gray. You might see black. I use a mix of brown and blue. You might see all kinds of tans, darker browns, lighter browns. You might see pinkish colors in the ears, in the nose or around the nose. Around the eyes might be pinkish. The mouth, the tongue will be pinkish. You might see white, which actually contains grays and browns. Okay? White animals contain pale color. Your eyes might be green, golden, brown, blue, yellow. It is helpful to, first of all, experiment. Take the time to experiment with different color mixes. And take notes and create color charts. We have a lesson at the bottom of today's lesson. There is a link to a color chart tutorial. It really depends on what you prefer. Like some people like to create color charts. I find them helpful, but it's definitely worth experimenting before moving into your painting. Let's talk about some eye colors. These are based on tutorials found in our school. Look for Conquer Eyes in watercolor. That's one of our courses that might be helpful. So for grays and blacks, I use a mix of French ultramarine blue and either burnt umber or burnt sienna. And in these eyes, these brown eyes, I often begin with yellow. Allow it to dry completely. Then layer by layer, I build the browns. Sometimes you might even see pink in an eye, and I use permanent rose. If you are painting a green eye, I often begin with yellow, let it dry completely, and then you can start layering your greens or even layer pale blue. Sometimes yellow ochre, sometimes browns. With every layer, you change the character of the color. These are tutorials in our school. If you need help finding them, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. For blue eyes, you decide what kind of blue you want to use. You could use French ultramarine blue, Winsor blue, cobalt, cerulean, whatever, any blue that you have on hand. You choose the blue that you like. That's where experimenting comes in. If you have yellow and golden eyes, I often start with Winsor lemon, let it dry, and then I layer yellow ochre. I layer browns. I layer grays and blacks, sometimes a little bit of green. So let's look at some examples. Some examples of, these are your animals. So if you're painting a white animal, and what great photos these are. Aren't these cute? Okay. White contains color. You ask yourself, what colors do I see in the eyes? These eyes, I think, are brown. What colors are in the nose? We've got some grays and blacks. We do have a pinkish nose. We have tutorials for all of these things. And what color do you see in the fur? You're probably going to see some kind of very pale, well, not always pale, but you're probably going to see some kind of gray. Might be brownish gray. You might see browns. So white animals contain color. If you have mixed colors, you're asking yourself, what colors do I see? What are the lightest colors? You might see tan. You might see very pale brown. In the basset hound, I think the eyes contain some pink. What colors are the eyes? What colors are the noses? I see on the right, we've got a little bit of tongue showing, okay? And so you're writing down, what colors do I see? Darkest, lightest, midtones, and then you decide what colors to use. And that's where you go with what you want to use, or you ask, and I'm happy to provide input on what I think I would use. Here we've got black and white. Okay, for the blacks, I would use a mix of French ultramarine blue and burnt umber. For the whites, I would use that same mix, but much more pale. Now, this dog on the right, it looks black initially, but then I'm thinking, oh, is it brownish? So we can talk about that. But I would use the same mix, French ultramarine blue or burnt umber and burnt sienna. If your photo is really dark, adjust the brightness of the photo so you can better see the details. For the image on the right, I might experiment. Well, I would probably layer either burnt umber or burnt sienna with a yellow. If you have an animal that's very complicated, complex shapes and lines, you break it down and you ask yourself, what is the lightest color that I see? In the cat, in all of these images, I think the lightest color is either white or very pale gray. And then what are the darker colors that you see? You might see tans, browns, darker grays, blacks. Break it down, break the subject down into smaller parts. This image on the right has beautiful brown eyes. I would start with Winsor lemon and then layer browns over it. Well, let's look at your checklist and finish today. So look at your photo in choosing colors and ask yourself, download the worksheet. It might help to get your thoughts in order. What colors do I see? What are the lightest colors that I see? Am I seeing white? Am I seeing tan? Am I seeing light brown? What are the darkest? Am I seeing dark brown? Black? What are the middle colors, not the darkest or the lightest? And then decide what colors shall I use. And if you're not sure, we will work together, because the idea is to choose your colors so you'll be ready to start your painting. Just a few colors are needed. Blue and brown creates all kinds of grays, blacks, and browns. Some kind of yellow, some kind of pink and red. So your mission this week, and then I'm going to go back and see if we have any more questions. take the rest of this week and take next week, or as long as needed. Choose your reference photos or your reference photo if you haven't yet. Decide on the layout. Decide on the size. Maybe you have already. That's great. Get your paper ready. Stretch your watercolor paper so it won't wrinkle. Because tomorrow we're talking about creating your drawing. Okay? And you want to have your paper ready so you can create your drawing. But you have time. No pressure. Choose your colors. Get your paints ready to go. Tomorrow we'll talk about your drawing. And if you're not sure of anything, we will talk. I will be reaching out to you via email either today or tomorrow. So taking one more look, see if we have any questions. Let's see, Gator Phone Board. Yes, I will be looking at your photo and helping you choose colors if you're not sure. Happy to do that. What colors do I like for teeth? You know, it's funny. You think teeth are white, but they're not really. I'm going to cover my teeth up. I tend to use a very pale brownish gray or sometimes very, very pale yellow ochre for teeth. And we do have some tutorials that you can use as a guide. There it is, everyone. What great questions. I hope I didn't miss anything. If you have a question, reach out to me. And we are back here tomorrow, same time. I believe tomorrow's lesson will not be as long as today. Rewatch this video, take notes, and thank you so much for being here. It's a lot of fun when we have so many people and so many comments in the chat. All right. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.